In this video, we continue with our series on the basics of 5th edition D&D, which Baldur's Gate 3 will be based off of as confirmed by Sven Vincke of Larian Studios. We'll be taking a look at proficiency, skills, and advantage and disadvantage, and how they apply to things mentioned in our previous video, as well as the differences between them now compared with earlier editions of Dungeons & Dragons. In our previous video, we took a look at the D20 and the abilities and how they play a huge part in the mechanics of 5th edition D&D. They are fundamentals that all Baldur's Gate 3 players could benefit from knowing, so if you're not familiar with them and haven't watched the video yet, I suggest you begin there before watching this one. Otherwise, we'll begin with advantage and disadvantage and how it affects the game in 5th edition. Advantage and disadvantage are relatively new to Dungeons & Dragons and arrived with the 5th edition version of the game in 2014. This mechanic is not implemented into previous versions of the game, so this one aspect may not be familiar to many D&D players who have not played since 4th edition. There are many scenarios in the game where players will have either advantage or disadvantage, and these make things easier or harder for the character depending on which they have. Like many things in Dungeons & Dragons, advantage and disadvantage are applied to the roll of the D20. Advantage means that you roll the D20 2 times when making an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, and use the higher of the two values. Conversely, disadvantage means that you roll the D20 2 times using the lower of the two values. Advantage roughly doubles your chances for success, while disadvantage roughly halves it. If we take the scenario we used in our previous video of the party coming to a door and add disadvantage, let's see what happens. You and your party come to a door you cannot open and it has a strength check DC of 15. Your level 10 fighter has 18 strength, giving him an ability modifier of +4, so you decide to use him to try to force it open. However, the ground is muddy, giving him disadvantage on his attempt. On his first roll, he rolls a 13, meaning under normal circumstances he would succeed. However, he has disadvantage due to the mud, so he rolls again and this time gets a 7. The 7 roll is then used and he fails to open the door. Disadvantage is one of the worst situations you can be in while rolling in 5th edition D&D and should be avoided at all costs, while advantage drastically improves your chances of success and so should be sought out. Keep this in mind when making your characters and when deciding whether or not how to proceed with situations in Baldur's Gate 3. Now that you know how advantage and disadvantage work, let's move on to proficiency and how it applies to 5th edition. All characters in 5th edition D&D have what is called a proficiency bonus. This is a positive modifier that increases as that character gains levels and works somewhat similarly to ability modifier because it is added to D20 rolls. Each player character begins the game with a proficiency bonus of +2, increasing by +1 every 4 levels to a maximum of +6. This is 5th edition's way of making your character more powerful as its level raises, increasing its likelihood of succeeding in rolls. Note that proficiency bonus is the same for all characters who are the same level, regardless of class or race. Proficiency bonus is only added to the D20 rolls of things that you have proficiency in, and these are determined by the combination of your race, background, class, and feats. This means that you will not gain this bonus on all of your rolls, but instead only on the things your character is good at. The following is a list of things proficiency applies to. Attack rolls using weapons you're proficient with, ability checks using skills you're proficient in, ability checks using tools you're proficient with, saving throws you're proficient in, attack rolls with spells you cast, and saving throw DCs for spells you cast. If we take the example of the rogue attacking the orc we used from the previous video, factoring in proficiency bonus, it would now look something like this. Your level 10 elf rogue is attacking an enemy orc that has an armor class of 13. She is using a longbow and has a dexterity modifier of +3. She rolls the d20 and gets an 11 and then adds her dex modifier of +3. Since elves are proficient with the longbow, she adds her proficiency bonus +4, giving her a total of 18. This means she was successful in hitting the orc with her arrow. She then rolls a d8, which is the die that the longbow uses for damage, and gets a 4. She adds the +3 dex modifier for a total of 7 damage. Proficiency bonus is not added to the damage roll. You can also take the example of the druid using Call Lightning on the goblins, factoring in proficiency bonus, and now it looks like this. Your level 18 druid uses the spell Call Lightning around a bunch of goblins. His wisdom is 23, so he has a spellcasting ability modifier of +6. This means the DC of his spell is 20. 8 plus spellcasting ability modifier +6, plus proficiency bonus +6, and any goblin who doesn't roll at least 20 after all their modifiers will take 3 d10 damage, the sum of 3 rolls of a d10 die, and any who does will take half that amount. Proficiency bonus is always used to calculate spell DC, no matter what class you play, but it is not added to the damage roll. In 5th edition D&D, players do not receive a penalty for attacking with weapons they are not proficient with, but instead do not gain their proficiency bonus. And when using armor or shields they are not proficient with, They have disadvantage on any ability check, saving throw, or attack roll that involves strength or dexterity, and they cannot cast spells. This is really bad and means players should definitely avoid using armor or shields they do not have proficiency in. This is a much more simplified version of Proficiency than was in previous versions of D&D and Pathfinder, making it much easier to understand for the average gamer. Note that in Pathfinder Kingmaker, the PC game, you could not use equipment that you didn't have proficiency in, so you never had to worry about penalties. With these things in mind, let's move on to skills. Skills in 5th edition are used throughout the course of the game to help characters overcome obstacles. What skills you have and which you are proficient with will be determined during character creation, and are usually tied to your class, race, and background. Each skill in the game falls within an ability, and skills are essentially a specific aspect of that ability. For instance, Sleight of Hand falls under Dexterity because having faster reflexes and being more agile would help you steal things. Or for instance, Persuasion falls under Charisma because being charismatic would help persuade someone. The following is a list of skills in the game and what ability they fall under. When a player makes an ability check that also uses a skill, they will gain their proficiency bonus to their D20 roll if they have proficiency in that skill, otherwise they roll as normal, including only their ability modifier. Let's take the example of the fighter trying to open the door and factor in the athletics skill. You and your party come to a door you cannot open, and it has a strength athletics check DC of 15. Your level 10 fighter has 18 strength, giving him an ability modifier +4, and he also has proficiency in athletics since he chose it during character creation, so you decide to use him to try to force it open. However, the ground is muddy, giving him disadvantage on his attempt. On his first roll, he rolls a 13. On his second roll, he gets a 7. Before, this would have resulted in failure because it was simply a strength check, not a strength athletics check, but this time he gets to add his proficiency bonus, giving him 7 plus 4 from strength, plus 4 from proficiency bonus, equaling 15, and he still manages to open the door. This is generally how skills work, and you'd be wise to select ones that line up with your ability modifiers for best results with your characters. However, there are some instances when things are calculated passively, for example whether you can open a lock or if you can spot something hidden. This is typically used in circumstances where the player could simply test again and again until they succeed, and I highly anticipate this being a big part of Baldur's Gate 3. When you calculate something passively, you simply take 10 and then add all things that would normally apply, ability modifier, proficiency, and advantage or disadvantage, to come up with a static number. In the case of advantage, you add 5 to your number, and in the case of disadvantage, you subtract 5. Let's do an example. You and your party are exploring a dungeon and come to an area that looks suspiciously like there's a secret door. There is one there indeed, but it has a wisdom perception check of 20 to spot, so you'll not see it unless one of your party can reach that number. Your level 14 ranger has 16 wisdom plus 3 and has proficiency in perception plus 5, giving him an 18, which isn't enough to detect the door. But let's suppose that he has the dungeon delver feat, giving him advantage on wisdom perception checks to reveal hidden doors. This would give him a total of 23 and the door would be revealed. Tools. Tools are items in D&D that can help a player do something they wouldn't otherwise be able to do, but unlike skills, they are not tied to a specific ability. Players who have proficiency with a tool will add their proficiency bonus to their roll when trying to use said tool, further increasing their chances of success. In Baldur's Gate 3, the use of tools is likely to be handled passively to prevent players from having to just keep attempting until they succeed, or even reloading. For example, perhaps your level 8 rogue is using thieves' tools to open a locked chest that has a dexterity DC of 15. She adds her dexterity modifier plus 3 to her chance to open it, and she is proficient with thieves' tools, so she adds her proficiency bonus as well. This would be 10 plus 3 plus 3, giving her 16, and she succeeds. Knowing these things about proficiency, advantage and disadvantage, and skills will help you tremendously when building your characters. It will allow you to focus and specialize each to do exactly what you need them to do, resulting in more success and less frustration. This was the second of several videos on the basics of 5th edition D&D, basics that will apply to Baldur's Gate 3 and prepare you for what's to come hopefully next year. The purpose of this video was to try to explain fundamental mechanics that Baldur's Gate 3 players could benefit from knowing, helping them to make better decisions about their character development. In the next video, I'll be covering feats, weapons, and armor and what role they play in 5th edition and likely Baldur's Gate 3.